You just saw what you'll be buying tacos for, okay? As we suggested, if you want to tip the tumbler, go ahead. $1 per taco, and I'm sure Stella's probably in the kitchen right now with the kids. The first glimpse we get of God in the Scripture, He's working, He's creating, He's bringing everything as we know it into existence. And then He creates a human being by the name of Adam and eventually Eve. And He puts them into the garden. And He says, I want you to take what I've created and I want you to continue creating with me and working with me. We were created by God to work and to enjoy the work as a blessing and to rule over the dominion of our realm of work. We want to look today at some of the Proverbs. Most of the passages we're going to look at are from Proverbs. A few others thrown in, such as this first one here from Ephesians chapter 2, which reminds us that we are God's workmanship and that we were created in Christ Jesus for good works. When we go to work at our jobs, when we go to work at home, when we go to work with our neighbors, our kids, our relationships, when we're at work, it is to do good works and to demonstrate the good God who works with us in all that we do in His name. So we want to look at a few passages here that remind us of what our work is for, the effects of our work, and how we ought to go about it and call it good at the end of the day. We want to, number one, we remember who the owner is. When we work and we, quote, earn our living and we earn a salary and we bring home something that we have earned, we need to keep in mind who the real owner of that is. The Scripture tells us that the earth is the Lord's and everything that is in it. Proverbs says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. We want to honor the Lord with what we earn, recognizing that He is the giver of it. He's given us the ability to work and to earn. He's blessed us with many things. And we never should forget that He's the true owner of it. A few years ago, there was a story in the Reader's Digest about a woman who was in the airport. And she was waiting on her connecting flight. And she had a little extra time, so she went to the snack bar and got a little package of cookies. And she sat down and started to read the paper. And in just a few minutes, she heard this rustling sound, and she looked over and was surprised to see that there was this man, neatly dressed, nice-looking man, who was getting a cookie out of that package. Well, that wasn't quite expected. And so, she thought, well, that's pretty brazen. And she took a cookie herself, just kind of in defiance of what she was saying. Went back to reading her newspaper, and she heard that rustling sound again. She looked over, and he was getting another cookie. She grabbed a cookie, wolfed it down, and this went on for a little while, off and on, until finally there was one cookie left. And this man broke it in two and pushed half over to her and ate the other half. Well, she was just fit to be tied and as angry as all get out. And finally they called her flight number, and so she hurried to get up, and she went toward the gate to get to her flight, opened her purse to get her ticket out, and there was this package of cookies in her purse, unopened. She'd been eating someone else's cookies. She forgot that what she thought was hers really belonged to someone else. When the Lord blesses us with strength and opportunity and ability to work and to receive the cookies as a reward, we need to remember to whom they belong. Secondly, we need to embrace our work, the wise man tells us in Proverbs. In Proverbs 22, he says, "Do you see a person skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." If you take what God has gifted you with, if you polish that up and you become skilled at your occupation, skilled at your work, a competent worker, then you'll be rewarded for that. In chapter 13, the wise man said, "Lazy people want much, but get little." Have you ever noticed that how much you have, whether it's energy or possessions, doesn't really connect with how much you're going to have? You may want a lot, you may want as much as anybody, but if you don't have the energy or the embracing effort here to go out and work hard, those who work hard, they're the ones who will prosper, the wise man tells us. It's not just enough to want something. The hard work has to come in there. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. You have that little visual on your outline there. Whatever you do, whether you're working in the church, whether you're working at your 9-to-5 job, whether you're working around the house, whatever your job, if you're going to work, embrace it. Work hard. That will be rewarded. That's the promise. It may not look like it's coming soon enough or big enough, but the reward will come. The Lord promises that to those who are willing to embrace their work. You know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. So if you took that attitude with you all this week, that whatever you're doing, from the highest to the lowest, from the superior to the menial, whatever you're working at, you're doing it for the Lord and you want to do a good job. That rules out half-heartedness, that rules out sloppiness, that rules out laziness. And the lazy person is talked about again and again in the book of Proverbs. Thirdly, as we work, we want to avoid debt. And there's quite a bit in the book of Proverbs that's said about this. We'll just take a look here at a passage from Proverbs chapter 22. "Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender." If you don't avoid debt, if you have a habit of using the credit cards excessively, that old saying, I came, I saw, I conquered, has been changed to I came, I saw, I shopped. And the old saying in Latin, weenie, weenie, winky, has been changed to weenie, weenie, visa. Okay? The V's in Latin are pronounced like W's. But we have a habit of getting into debt, and the wise man in Proverbs warns us about that several times, and he says, don't become a servant to the one you owe. If you get into debt, you're going to be this servant to this individual or to this debt that you've accumulated. I saw some figures this last week, which just kind of amazed me. Let's say that you borrowed $7,500, $7,500, and you did this on a credit card, and they were charging you 18% interest, which is not unusual for a credit card. And usually the poorer you are and the more risky your credit is, the higher you're going to be paying on interest. That's just the way it is. Those who want to get into usury, as the Old Testament calls it, will hit the poor the hardest. But if you're paying 18% interest on $7,500 and you make the minimum payment of $150 per month, how long will it take you to pay off $7,500? 30 plus years. And by the time you've paid it off, you will have paid $23,000 on a $7,500 loan. If you get into debt and you're credit card poor, and some people max out multiple credit cards, the future is not going to look bright. Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University, has talked a lot about debt and the dangers of getting into debt. And one of his sayings, which I love, is act your wage. Don't act like you have more than you really do. If you're interested in some of his material, we've been doing a little house arranging this past week, and we've come across an old Dave Ramsey material. I'd be glad to share that with some of you if you'd mention it to me and you'd like to see some of his material that was shown here quite some time ago. But avoid debt. And then number 4, have a plan. If you're going to work and you're going to be remunerated for that work, you need to have a plan for what you're going to do with what you're rewarded with. The wise have wealth and luxury. The fools spend whatever they get. Why? Because they're not planning. They're not planning to save. They're not planning to give a tithe to the church or to put away 10% in savings on a regular basis. In the family that I grew up in, the Lord came first. Whatever we had or didn't have, the offering stayed the same. And we started with that, and then we saved what we could after that. But we have to have a plan. If you don't plan to give as you are prospered, and that's what that verse assumes, to give as you're prospered assumes that you're planning to do it in proportion to the blessing that you've received, then probably you're going to be very sporadic in your giving, not dependable on that score. Proverbs 19, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. I hope that as part of your plan, the poor are in there. You may have the church offering, you may have special needs here, you may have a savings amount here, but also have this slush fund for the poor, that you can dip into that and help emergency needs as they arise. Nothing does the heart any more good than having to give to the poor when the time arises. But you only do that if you have a plan. Number 5, expect and accept the bad with the good. Okay? Expect that there'll be some negatives along with the positives. Expect and accept the fact that there are going to be some bad things that accompany good things. We have a way of saying, no, I don't want the bad. If the good stuff involves anything that's bad, I'm not interested, I don't want it. There's a great verse in Proverbs chapter 14, which some of you probably seen Mark Gungor talk about, and I can't do as good a job as he did. But here's the verse. He says, without oxen a stable stays clean, but when you need a strong ox, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. Now what he, as Gungor, if you recall, says this means is, you want a large harvest? That's a good thing. Okay, you need the ox to help you with that large harvest. You're not going to be able to harvest as much by yourself. You need that ox to help you out. Okay? Well, the plus side of not having an ox is you got a clean stable. The bad side of having an ox is, what do you have in the stable after the ox has been there? You have poo. Okay? The poo goes with the good stuff. You say, well, I'd like to harvest a bumper crop of children. My dad was the first of 12 in his family. I mean, they had a bumper crop of kids back then. But as every mom and a few dads also know, that when you have children, sometimes in the first couple of years, maybe even beyond that, your job stinks, right? Because with that little bundle of blessing, the little child that you have, that's good, what do you have? You have poo. It will come. Have the kids, and it'll be part of what you have. Well, we accept that because kids are cute, and even their poo, can be cute when you compare it to, to later on, okay? Cute little poo. And that's doable. I can endure that because they can't help it, and it's understandable. It's a necessary part. Well, why don't we transfer that thinking out to other areas where we enjoy the blessing, the good stuff, along with the bad stuff that comes with it? How many people have bailed out of church because, of the poo? Because there was something or someone there that I didn't like, someone said something, someone did something, and I'm done. Well, was there anything good that happened? Yes, there was some good there. But those people are like a bunch of oxen. I don't want to be yoked with them. If you're going to be yoked with oxen, you're going to have the poo. If you want a clean stable, don't go the ox route. If you want a clean, undisturbed existence, isolate yourself. But then you're also cutting yourself off from the harvest of blessing. And God knows that if we're going to become loving people, we need to be around people to learn how to love, even the difficult ones, even those who are ox-minded, okay? So we need to accept the bad that comes along with the good. And one of God's blessings to us, whether we want to receive it or not, is that He uses our trouble. He uses the stinky stuff in our life to use as fertilizer to make us more fruitful. When we're going through it, we don't like it, we don't recognize it, we don't want to have anything to do with it. But the stuff that is bad, that we don't want to deal with, can be used. God works for good in all things. Finally here, keep your focus. Keep a steady focus. Why you're working, what you're going to do with what the Lord blesses you. Put yourself into it. Embrace your work with all you have. Proverbs 13, wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Just ask the lotto winners how quickly it can disappear, how many problems come with that. They said, I didn't expect all of this trouble with all this good stuff. It's the way life is. Wealth from hard work grows over time. You're more likely to keep it and to enjoy it and to use it wisely if you worked at it slowly, steadily, with hard work over time. The get-rich-quick stuff, the microwave money, quickly disappears. A hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies has no sense. We've all met that individual who's waiting for his boat to come in. And someday he's going to do all of this, when Fantasyland arrives on his shore and docks in front of his house. He's living in this fantasy dream world, and it's not as dependable as the steady, persistent, faithful, hard work. Work brings profit, but mere talk leads to poverty. We've got to walk the talk, not just talk it. We may dream, we may start with talking, but it has to have the hard work that goes into it. A hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies ends up in poverty. How are you doing as a worker for the Lord this morning. He has created you, He's created me for good works. Good works on the job, good works in relationship with our neighbors that we live with on the street, good works in relationship to those who live and occupy the same house as us, good works as we go about our day. That's what we're created for. Before time began, God created us, worked with us and for us, and brought us about. We are His workmanship, so that we might do good works. And when we let our light shine by our good works, then God is glorified when we do that. If you need to respond to His invitation, become a worker for the Lord, enlist in His army. We used to sing a song, to the work, we'll work till Jesus comes. That's our task. That's who we are. We are workers, and we have plenty of work ahead of us. Work in encouraging and edifying one another. And there are some who are obviously out for the holiday, but others who could have been here, might have been here, if we had put ourselves to the task of encouraging them. Let's do that this week. Let's work for the Lord. Let's do good works in His name so He'll be glorified. And as we do that, and as we accept any negatives that come with the good, we'll grow into what He wants us to be. His workmanship, His poem that He's still working on, still creating in us. If you need to respond, will you do that while we stand and sing?